Hi there, my name is Katie Saints, and today I want to talk to you guys about handling behaviors in public and how to handle comments from strangers, friends, or family about your child, their diagnosis, their behaviors, and all of that kind of stuff. Those are some tricky situations for all parents. When you go into public and your child wants something and you tell them no, and then they throw a tantrum, this can be embarrassing sometimes, or you feel like a bad parent. Sometimes people make rude comments, or you're worried that people think that you're hurting your child, or something like that. So it can be really stressful. So I want you guys to have the confidence that you're doing the right thing. If you know that you're responding correctly to a stressful situation, that helps to make it less stressful. So, I'm going to start with proactive strategies. You want to set yourself up for success. So, plan out ahead of time what you're going to do on the outing with your child. Determine what you're okay with, what you're not okay with, and predict for the child as much as you can what the expectations are. So, for example, you could say to your child, okay, we're going to Target. I am going to allow you to get one toy and one toy only. And so if you are stay by me and follow the rules and all of these things, you will go home with a toy. If you do not, then if you do not stay by me or follow the rules, you will not get a toy. So you spell it out. You would also tell the child if you're doing anything else. We're going to go to Target, then we're going to the grocery store, then I'm going to stop by the auto store. I don't know. Just whatever your list is of places that you're going to go. Also determine what your client can handle or your child can handle. So maybe this is a skill that they need to work on and develop more. So set them up for success where in the beginning stages only go to one place. If that's all they can handle, or if they really struggle with that, you don't want to overwhelm them with too many different places to go. So this is something that needs to be practiced a lot, though. If it's stressful for you to take your child in the community because of safety concerns or behaviors, it's natural to want to avoid that. However, avoiding it makes the problem worse because your child needs practice in order to get better in the community. Your child needs exposure to the community so that they can work on those skills. So, if you have a therapy team that can support you with this, take advantage of it. Have them take your child out once a week so they can work on this. Multiple times a week would be even better. So, for different stores or different events, you can write social stories. And in these social stories, you can have pictures of what they can expect, and you can describe what the expected behaviors are for that environment. So, this way, your child thoroughly knows what to expect. Now, granted, we can't predict everything that's going to happen in a community outing. And so let your child know that they should expect the unexpected as well. Sometimes if we give our children the impression that we can predict every detail, when it doesn't work out that way, it can be stressful. So, forewarning your child, hey, this is the plan. It might change. Unexpected things happen. We don't know. That can help set them up for success. So the next thing to look at is what skills we want to help your child develop to make sure they can be successful in the community. So one thing that's really important in the community is knowing where your child is. I think most parents have been there where you are in a crowded place and all of a sudden in a blink of an eye, your child darts off and you suddenly don't know where they are. This is such a stressful time for a parent. And so, this skill is super important to teach your child. You have to stay by adults, you have to stay where they can see you. And if you want to go somewhere else, you have to tell the adult you are with. You can't just wander off. This is a skill that needs practice. Telling our children this is not enough. We need to go out in the community and practice this. And when they wander off, making sure they come back, going after them, things like that, so that they learn how important this skill is. And so you can determine if the child is motivated by the outing or not. If they really want to be on the outing, you can use the outing in and of itself as a motivator. So if they're not staying close to you, if they're not being safe, you could go back out to the car and be like, okay, we're gonna go to the car now and we're gonna start over because you weren't being safe. And so, if the child really wants to be on that outing, that can help motivate them to follow the rules. The next skill that's really important to teach is stranger danger. If your child does wander off, or if you're talking to someone, say you're purchasing something, and then some other stranger starts talking to your child, you want your child to have the basic safety skills to know not to go with that person or not to give that person personal information or all of that kind of stuff. Additionally, you want your child to know who's safe to talk to and who's not safe to talk to. So, for example, if your child gets lost, you want them to know who they can go to for help in order to find you again. They need to be able to identify community helpers, employees, or even I tell my children, if you ever lose me in public, go up to a family and ask for help if you don't see any employees or a police officer or something like that. Don't go up to someone who looks unsafe to you. Go up to people who look kind and things like that. So sometimes we want to be more black and white with our kids and just tell them employees, police officers, firemen, community helper type people are the only ones you can talk to. So you can determine with your child what you think the most appropriate description is if they do need help in a crisis. So, next thing your children need to know is personal information. So, say they do get lost, they're going to need to know your name. They're going to need to know your phone number. They might need to know your address, and different stuff like that. So, it's important that they know who they can tell that information to and who they can't. So, if they're lost and they tell a store employee, my mom's name is Katie, that's great. But if they tell just some random stranger, here's my address, that's a problem. So make sure that they have these skills. And so you can role play these situations at home to practice them. But again, this is something that needs real life practice as well. And so you can determine based on your child's safety levels if this is something you should role play or if this is something you can practice in public. So, the next thing that's really important for a child to have for a skill when in the community is the ability to wait. There's a lot of waiting, whether you're waiting in line or you're waiting to look at an item, maybe you're waiting for an activity. This can be really hard for kids. So, we like to work on the skill by systematically increasing the time that a child has to wait. If they really struggle with waiting, we would start at, just a couple seconds, and then it would turn into a minute, then 2 minutes, and we would just keep building that as the child learned the skill so that they would be to a place where they could wait as long as they needed. If you take your child to big amusement parks, sometimes the wait to go on a ride is 30 minutes. I've gone to parks where we've literally waited an hour for a ride. And if your child can't handle that, that takes a lot of fun out of that event. So practicing these skills is really important to help you guys get to a place where your family can enjoy those events and not have too many behaviors related to it. So this takes practice and repetition. You can practice the skill in all sorts of different situations, whether at home or in the community. This skill applies to school, this skill applies to relationships and work, so it's super important. The next one is the ability to accept no. No matter where you are in the community, there's going to be things that your child wants that they can't have. And so, if telling your child no results in a meltdown every time, this is going to make your community outings not as fun for you and your child. So, practicing getting your child to accept no is really important. And so, the better they are at accepting no and waiting for things, this is going to help everybody have a much better time. So this is something you can role play. This is something you can practice in your home life and out in the community. So this is something that should be worked on all the time. So let's go to reactive strategies now and just talk about functions of behavior. So as a parent, it's really important that you get good at identifying the function of the behavior. So ABA teaches us that there's 4 functions of behavior. So want is one of the functions. They want a tangible item. They want a toy, they want a cookie, they want something that they see. And so they don't necessarily even have to see it. They just think of something they want. And so, they ask you for it. And if you say no, sometimes that results in a tantrum. If that is the case, then the answer is no. Your child needs to learn that having a problem behavior to get what they want will not get them what they want. So if a child repeatedly throws things to get what they want, but it never works, that behavior will go away. So just like the fishing analogy, if you go fishing in the same spot every day but never catch a fish, you're going to change spots. So we want your child to learn the same thing. If I cry and scream to get what I want and I never get what I want, I'm going to pick something different. So the next one is escape. Now, this is something to determine what's going on with your child in the environment. Some of our kids really don't like being in the community. It's overstimulating for them. There's a lot of noises and people and all this kind of stuff. And so they might have problem behaviors to get out of what they're doing. They maybe don't want to be there. If that is the case, you need to keep them there until their behavior is appropriate. Again, just like want-based behaviors, we need them to learn problem behaviors do not get them what they want. So, as embarrassing as it might be, or as stressful as it might be, if your child is having a meltdown in the middle of the Target aisle, you have to wait them out. And you need to let them know, hey, your behavior needs to be appropriate before we leave. And so, try not to worry about people looking at you or, what they might be thinking, because the only way for that behavior to go away is for the child to learn that it doesn't work. And so, it requires us enduring those situations in public so that your child can learn, hey, these behaviors don't work. So the next one is attention-seeking behavior. So sometimes our kiddos will have problem behavior to get a reaction out of us. So if that's the case, you need to ignore the behavior. So what I mean by ignore the behavior is not give attention to it. So for example, don't say to the child, hey, that's inappropriate, stop acting like that. That would be giving it attention. You would keep an eye on the child to make sure they're safe, make sure they're not running off, things like that. But you wouldn't interact with them. If you needed to, you can block to make sure they're not making a mess or hurting themselves or hurting others. But interact with them as little as possible. So sometimes our kids will run away to get attention. And in public, that's so hard because if you chase them, you're reinforcing the behavior and they're getting the reaction they want. But sometimes we have to, otherwise we're going to lose them. We won't know where they go, or they might get, in an unsafe situation. So we have to follow them. So if that's the case, don't talk to them. Try not to be fun about it. Try not to interact. And so block them, and just the less talk, the less interaction, the better. So just do whatever you can to make that as minimal as possible. So the next thing I want to talk about is what we call automatic reinforcement. So sometimes our children will act up in public, and it's not because they want something. It's not because they want escape. It's not because they want your attention. It's because there's something going on inside. It could be sensory issues. It could be medical issues. It could be any number of things that are going on internally. So if that is the case, your child needs to learn that that is not an appropriate expression of what they're feeling. So say, for example, every time I got sick, I punched my husband in the face. And, I said, I don't feel good. And so this makes me feel better. So this is okay. Obviously that would not be acceptable. So even though it's valid for me to maybe be upset when I'm sick, I still have to treat people kindly. I still have to do my best to interact well with others. And so the same is true for your children. We might understand why they're doing it. Take, for example, a lot of the kids that I work with have described that the neon lights in a lot of stores are really offensive to them. The buzzing drives them crazy. It's too bright, or they're just totally overstimulated. There's stimuli everywhere in stores, and so that can be too much. Or just all the people in stores are stressful. So that might be a legitimate stressful environment for your child. And that's okay if it is. That's valid if it is. But they still need to learn how to act when they're feeling that way. So it's important to hold them accountable. It's important to give them exposure to those environments that they struggle with so they can learn to deal with it. So that's a really consistent pattern that, say, for example, if a store is really overstimulating to your child, if you go there a lot, that's going to help it be less overstimulating. That's going to help your child cope better. So even though it feels like you're doing something mean by taking your child to the exact place where they struggle, you're actually doing the compassionate thing. You're helping them be able to be in another environment. When you're picturing your child as an adult, you want them to be independent and as successful as possible. But if they can't go to the department stores because it's too overstimulating for them, that's going to make it hard for them to meet their own needs. And so, yes, there's alternative ways like ordering online and things like that. But we want your child to be able to handle any environment, and it requires that exposure. So, the next thing I want to talk about is what to say to people. So, okay, you're sitting there in Target, your child's having a meltdown. I've heard so many stories of just offensive things that strangers have said, like, get your kid under control, that kid needs a spanking. Back in my day, we would actually discipline our kids. People say offensive things, or what's wrong with your child, just all these not helpful things. And that can be really, really tough. It can be discouraging. You're already struggling. Your kid's having a meltdown. You're not having fun. And then strangers make these comments, or even people friends, family members, and that can be really hard. So the first thing I want to tell you is don't take it personal. And I know that's easier to say than do, but there's a lot more going on there. So, the person probably doesn't understand what's going on with your situation. Autism is an invisible diagnosis. It's not like with some other disorders where you can visually tell that someone has a diagnosis. So that's part of the problem. Another part of the problem is the person doesn't understand the discipline process that you're using or what you're going through specifically. And so while their comments are inappropriate, it definitely comes from a place of lack of understanding. So in that case, it is okay to educate parents or strangers and let them know a little bit more that's going on. It's okay to ignore them too and just completely blow them off because it's none of their business. You know, sometimes if you just say to people, hey, my kid is having a tantrum because he wanted something, and so I'm not going to give it to him and I'm waiting him out right now, then people will understand what you're doing and why, and then they'll understand, and that'll be the end of it. Sometimes parents take these situations as an opportunity to educate others on autism. You could say, my kid has autism, and right now they're really struggling with this environment, so we're coming here to practice exposure and practice being in the store, and this is part of how I'm going to help my child be successful. Those things sometimes are hard to say if you're upset too. Some people actually carry cards with them that they hand out to strangers. If strangers make comments and things like that, they just like give them a card and don't say anything at all. Some people will put clothes on their kids, like a bracelet or a shirt or something like that, that says something about their child having autism, just because they have found that sometimes people are more supportive if they know that in advance that the child has a diagnosis. So that's an option too. Sometimes if people, sometimes people have good intentions, they're just taking the wrong approach. So, what I mean by that is they might try and help you, but they don't know the right way to help you. And if that's the case, if you can tell that the person has good intentions, they just are doing the wrong things, you can tell them how to help. Maybe there's nothing they can do, but maybe there's something. So if there's a way that another person can help, then let them know. Because if they have good intentions, they're not trying to hurt you, they're trying to help you and partner with you. So hopefully they're open to that feedback on how to actually be helpful. Now, another thing to address, this is more common with family members or friends, is people's reactions to a label. So, for example, sometimes people have a really hard time with the autism diagnosis carrying that label on your child. And so, if that's okay, if that's the case, I think it's really important to educate people why autism doesn't have to be something to be ashamed of. I like to tell people about all the famous people who have autism. It's suspected that Steve Jobs had autism, and Dan Aykroyd, the producer of Ghostbusters. Some of these really cool, famous people who have accomplished great things, are thought to have had autism. And so that's what I like to tell people who really don't like the label. It doesn't mean that your child can't be successful. It might actually help your child be more successful. So the more people know about autism, the more understanding and accepting they can be of it. So if they understand that, hey, my kid doesn't always understand that it's gonna hurt your feelings if they don't say hi back to you, but it doesn't mean that he doesn't like you. It doesn't mean that he's rejecting you. Or like maybe your kid doesn't like hugs, he doesn't like to be touched, but your mom is hurt by that because she wants to give him hugs and so she feels rejected. So if you educate her on the sensory issues related to autism, hopefully then she can start to understand that it's not a rejection of her, it's just something internally going on with your child. So the more education we can give people, the more acceptance that we'll be able to get. Typically, lack of acceptance comes from lack of understanding. And maybe you feel like it's too difficult for you to describe to them what autism is or what's going on with your client, or I mean, with your child. If that's the case, invite them to a team meeting. Your therapist would love to talk about it and talk about the strengths and the different things your child struggles with. Whatever you want your therapist to educate your friends or family on, we'd be happy to. Additionally, if you don't want to go that route, there's tons of videos, such as this one, just about autism or the symptoms of autism. And so that can help people be more understanding too. It's so important that when we get hurtful comments, that we interpret them and look at where they're coming from. Because rarely is it coming from a place of someone trying to hurt you or attack you. Most of the time, it comes from lack of understanding and lack of education. And so, if that's the case, we can fix that with education. So, I hope this video is helpful for you. Please contact me if you have further questions about this topic. And additionally, if you want your therapist to help you talk to your family members, I just want to reiterate that that's an option for you as well, and we would be happy to do that. Alrighty, thanks so much.